So welcome everyone. This presentation is going to be done by our Student Advisory Board for the Committee on Learning and Teaching, otherwise known as SCOLT, on the SUNY Oswego campus. They're going to be discussing the top 11 strategies for enhanced learning and teaching pedagogy from discussions that they have as part of this advisory board on tips and things that they would like to see their instructors and faculty doing in the classroom. And I am going to have them introduce themselves. We'll start with Bryan, if you want to introduce yourself and your major and you're on campus.
Hi there, folks. My name's Bryan. I am a junior majoring in history at SUNY Oswego.
Mackenzie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mackenzie. I'm a junior anthropology and global studies major.
Delaney.
Hi everyone, I'm Delaney. I have a double major of Spanish and adolescent education with a minor in athletic coaching, and I am a senior.
Jacquelyn.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacquelyn. I'm a senior here at Oswego and my major is health promotion and wellness management with a minor in nutrition.
Abby.
Hi guys, I'm Abby. I'm a junior health and wellness major with a minor in health science and forensic science.
Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby, and I'm a senior with a major in psychology and wellness management.
Aiden.
Hi, my name is Aiden Wilson. I'm a finance and Hi, my name is Aiden Wilson. I'm a finance and marketing major with a minor in health science, and I'm a senior.
And Andrew, is he still on here or?
Yes.
There you are, Andrew.
My name's Andrew. I am a junior on campus, and I am a biology major with a minor in chemistry.
Great. All right, so we'll have them take it away.
All right, so to start off here, some accessibility to learning materials. Obviously, there's plenty of different things. Ignore the cat. He'll be coming in and out of here. So first thing here is sharing PowerPoints that you use in class. I know some professors don't like this, but as a student, it really helps me simply because it allows me to focus on what the professor is actually saying during lecture, as opposed to just quickly trying to write everything that's on the slide and not gaining anything else from the lecture. Some professors don't use slides, and that's completely okay, obviously. They use whiteboards, other things. Students take notes. That's fine. I would encourage those professors to send out study guides, which is the last point here. So they're spending their time studying what's actually going to be on the test and not spending 2-3 hours studying something that a professor deems unimportant that the student might not know. And then in the organization of Brightspace, there is a wide range of Brightspace organization from professors on campus. I've had one professor that only sends things out in announcements. There's no modules. There's nothing else except for the announcements he sends out on Brightspace. And then there's some professors that have 11 modules ready and in there before the semester even starts. So having some sort of level playing field with Brightspace organization just would help students out more. So we're not learning how to navigate one professor's Brightspace and then learning how to navigate another professor's Brightspace because they organize their Brightspace completely different. And it just helps students out in general, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so note-taking techniques, teaching effective note-taking techniques, so like introducing methods such as the Cornell notes, mind mapping, or two-column notes to help students organize information effectively. A lot of us aren't taught how to take notes, so it's kind of like a new thing for us. I know my freshman year, thankfully, I had a professor who did teach us different ways that we can take notes, because I feel like a lot of people just think it's just copying down whatever is on the slide and then just hoping for the next thing, and they don't really pay attention to what the professor is saying, so that could be difficult. And a way that you can also help students if you don't have the time to teach them how to take notes is just like during like syllabus weeks, telling them how you present information to them. Like, do you utilize presentations? And if you do use them, do you upload them offline? Which is a personal favorite of mine, just because when I'm in class, I can focus on what the professor is saying, and then I know I can go back and look at the slides that they have, so it's really helpful. Also, are you more conversational, aka are you discussion based? Because I recently had a class that was more discussion based, and it was kind of weird to navigate how to take notes, because it's just like, okay, they're saying a lot of things. What's actually like the thing that's going to be important? What's going to be there when I'm going to take an exam? Because I love talking and just having that discussion in class, but also I want to be prepared for when we're going to have an exam, because that is a important part of grading. And like, I need to pass the course, so I need to know what's there and what's important, like what's supplementary information and what's like the real thing that I need to focus on. Or are you a mix of both? And if you are a mix of both, I would recommend telling the student beforehand, like, hey, we're going to have presentations this day, so that they can prepare themselves for like, okay, this is what I need to write down, this is what I need to focus on. Or are we just going to have a discussion? So it's like, yeah, are we going to have a discussion? And also, if you tell the student beforehand, they can just adjust the way that they take notes. Lastly, I'd say encourage reflection and summarization. Like, after each course, maybe like, okay, so next class, we're going to be focusing more on this topic. So, like, read up more on that. Because if you want to have like a healthy discussion in class, students have to know what we're talking about, what we're going to be talking about, and what they need to look up on, so that they're not in class just lost, like, oh my gosh, I don't know this topic. Like, I read about it, but I didn't focus in on it. So now I don't know how to volunteer. I don't know how to participate and like contribute to the discussion. So just simple things like that can go a long way.
Yeah, following up on what Gabby just said, I was framing my idea of the slide as you don't know what you don't know, and it's always we. It's like playing the game of catch up. You know, it's better if like it's a well-oiled machine, like a mutually beneficial ecosystem, if both, you know, the professor and the student, you know, want to make sure like, okay, I'm doing well, and like, shoot, I didn't like get the information clearly enough, and like they follow up on that really quickly instead of not really getting the help that they need, which makes them, you know, suffer. Well, in shoot, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what I'm doing. And this attention uh is more focused like in individuals and small groups, because not everyone learns at their best when they're in 100 person lecture halls, or even in a group of 20. And we know that numerous studies have shown that immediate academic support encourages learning amongst your fellow peers and other students in your program and your department, promotes engagement in the class so people aren't, you know, listening to the professor yap on, and increases, you know, how much you're remembering and your grades. So some of the things that I were thinking about as well is that I've heard from other students that their professors offer extra credit for attending their office hours or going to tutoring at the Office of Learning Services. And uh, you know, they're like when we were talking about AI and in syllabi, I think someone else might have a slide on that. But you know, just making sure it's out there, like improving the promotion and advertising of it. You know, like, okay, you should go not only because it'll help you, but like you get to meet all these other people that kind of know the same problems you're going through. But also, like, if you have a learning disability, or like you need help with other things, it's a successful branch out into like, okay, I need to go to accessibility resources because maybe I do need extra time, or maybe the library can help me with stuff, and other like events like the research parties. And also something that I was thinking about, not just with embedded tutors, like students who have already taken the class and are now tutoring, like they know the professor that they can TA and like they can help, but also like study halls, like within departments. So like it depends on the major, but as a history major, some people, like my friends, come up to me and they're like, Bryan, are you the only history major on this campus? And I tell them, no, I'm not. But like if other people, especially first year students, know that there's a lot of other people going through the same things and asking the same questions, like they can study together, they can form friendships, and like also they'll be able to succeed because they're all helping each other out with the stuff that, I need to fill in this gap, and you know this and I don't know this. So yeah, I think that's pretty good.
This one's you, Aiden.
So yeah, curriculum engagement. So as soon as we go, I think we have a vibrant community. That's just really encouraged me to stay out of Oswego, because of the community being so warm and welcoming. And I think we should find better ways to more or less integrate the academics with the community of Oswego. We have about 150 clubs that are SE recognized, and I'm pretty sure there should be a club that's directly related or closely related to any field of study, whether it be like the Computer Science Association, we have a Tech Ed Student Association. There's something that's related to, there should be something related to every major. So a lot of times these clubs and organizations, they bring in guest speakers. And I've seen what works well is that when professors, they offer either extra credit or they have it built into the syllabus where you attend this event hosted by this club and you write a paper on it. So those are just like little ways that could really make a difference in just unifying our community more, integrating, what our students are doing, supporting them outside of the classroom, and also just enticing students to actually go and become a part of the other clubs and organizations that we have. And yeah.
Also,
Yep, go ahead, Gabby.
sorry. Also, it would be surprising to know how many people are in like a club that's in the same major and how much they talk to each other about like things that they're doing in class or just recommending things to each other. So I think it'll be beneficial for professors as well to encourage students to go there because it could save you a lot of extra works or emails with students asking questions because when they're in a club that is centered around that major, they can ask each other the question and they can also help each other out. And so also another thing is we have a big campus and we do a lot on this campus, regardless of like if it's major related or just like having guest speakers. And I think that's very important for faculty and staff or just like professors to like tell students about because sometimes it could be related to what they're doing, but it could also be related to like something that is just interesting to do. And also learning outside the classroom is very fun. I didn't realize it until last semester, but my professor, he would take us outside of class and he just have us like do people watching because this was kinesiology, and he actually made us look at what we were learning from the textbook and put a real world application to it so that we can actually see how it is in real life. So if you teach a course that is like that you can use the campus for, I would recommend because sometimes it's not always the best to sit in a classroom every single day. Sometimes it's good to see what you're teaching in real life. So maybe just utilizing the campus as best as you can because it is pretty big and there's a lot going on.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about active and passive instruction. So active instruction is when the students are actively engaged. The teacher is pausing for students to present their understanding throughout the lesson. This is learner-centered. While passive instruction is when the students are absorbing information that is generated from the teacher, which is teacher-centered. We can think of a lecture, whereas active instruction is more of students being included as well. So as an education major, I am very passionate about the benefits of active learning within the classroom and as a teacher myself. It activates higher order thinking. It creates a discussion, time to debate preconceived notions that might not even be brought up in class, but might be thought about the student individually. Develops collaborative skills, such as learning how to communicate with one another. Engagement equals motivation. They're directly interconnected. This also improves interpersonal skills, increases retention, pushes for creative thinking, and fosters real-world problem solving. In my personal experience, I have been in classrooms where the teacher allows the students to discuss most of the key points And that's where I feel that I've learned the most. Also in my high school classroom, there's a huge difference between the students sitting and listening to me speak, or lecture about something rather than letting them get engaged, letting them move up and down, getting with partners, getting with groups. I know for some it might not be ordeal, just because of like the lecture halls. I've been in a lecture class with about like 100 people before. That's a lot to maintain and to keep all together. Um, However, I just want the faculty members to keep in mind that active learning is student-based. It actually is, making less work for the teacher themselves. And some of the ideas that you come up with through active learning within the students is something that can't be come up with through just certain content. So I feel very passionate about it, and I believe that it's super important. As well as we just want our students to be engaged in our learning and education because we are very grateful for it, and it is an advantage for us.
And then Gabby, do you want to speak to this one? I think this was Kaylee's.
Yeah, okay. Adaptation plus resilience equals active learning, a case for task-oriented learning. Oh, so basically, hold on, sorry. What this was is what she wanted to say was that, sorry, give me 1 second. She wanted to say, what Kaylee meant was that, okay, active learning as a key for optimal student success should balance adaptation and resilience. While adaptation requires some awareness and accommodation of student learning preferences, as electives or higher education in given academic fields, it should come with tools for conquering the rigor of field-specific demands. So the 5 questions would be revolving around awareness. So how conscious are you of your institutional norms and style? Transparency. Do you provide through explanation of assignments connections to a wider curriculum? Relevancy. Does teaching style innovate with factors that change the current learning environment? So like the previous presentation that we just did, AI, technology use, and just like everything around that, like the ever-changing world that we're having, especially in regards to teaching. And balance. Do assignments offer students a variety that matches learning preferences and provide practice with field norms? So I think with these questions, or just taking these questions into consideration, you can kind of put yourself back in the students' shoes and think like, hey, is what I'm giving them gonna help them in the long run? Is this gonna motivate them to actually continue on in their education and to provide the best work that they can? And just how maybe you can even ask students like, hey, what type of things do you want, and give them more involvement when it comes to the material that you're teaching them. Like, hey, would you like us to do this, or would you like us to do this? Like, which ones are you guys more interested in? So that way you're teaching things that they're interested in and that they'll actively discuss, if that makes any sense. But yeah.
All right. So firstly, we're gonna talk about like reading before you go to class. So I think recently students generally, like, it depends on the field at least, but you don't really read your chapters before you go to class because we go to class and the professor's gonna talk about it anyway. So a lot of students question like, why am I even reading before? However, what I think has worked best, at least for me in the past, is when my professors, they attached assignments to the reading before class. That way I had to read before going, and then we were able to have a more intimate conversation. So I think what could help a lot is, giving us students key points of chapters to read before going to class. So like, you read a chapter of a book and it's like, 30, 40 pages. Sometimes students have to read that a week, or they have to read that before the class time starts. Some students have like several classes where they have to read as well, and it can be time consuming. And what I've noticed is that there are like certain features, certain parts of a chapter that are important, whereas there are others where like you won't even touch on in the class. So it's like, why am I reading this entire thing when we're really only going to touch on certain parts of it? So what I thought could work well is, just giving us a list of the things that you really want us to touch on in the chapters, before going to class to discuss them. Also, when I was a TA for a class in the School of Business, to remind students of, reading their chapters, we would have a reading, what to read in the chapters. We would just integrate them into the presentations before the upcoming class. That way they already knew what to do and what to come to class for and to discuss. Although, yes, there is a syllabus. If you already have a presentation, it just makes it a little bit easier and it's a quick reminder for students. And then, as I mentioned before, just having assignments available. Before I had questions that I had to answer. And to ensure that I wasn't using like AI, I would just have to, take the direct quote of what the text was saying, cite it, and then like say it in my own words. It allows students to, of course, express their understanding of the topic before. So maybe if you have like a test that's available that isn't graded, and you just say, ask your students, what do you think this means? What do you think that means? And then going through the chapter and then having them doing like a little mini quiz at the end to really test their understanding at the end of the module.
So when it comes to lecturing and test taking, we know that this is almost the traditional way of teaching, and that it's kind of hard to stray away from it. We know that benchmarks to see where students are definitely important, but there are different ways to facilitate learning so that each student can have their own experience with what they are learning and how they would like to use it in their future. It can go to the next slide. Thanks. So when it comes to certain things like assessments, to get these benchmarks, I have personally had professors who would have their students group up and learn a chapter, and to show what they have learned would therefore teach the rest of the class. That helped me because it made it more comfortable to ask questions to peers, even if they're not technically the experts in that area. It made it more comfortable to ask questions where you think, oh, I might think this is a stupid question. I don't want to say it out loud, but it makes it a more comfortable space. But also being able to use technology such as TikTok, which may or may not be in the future, but to have students teach, like personally for me, in anatomy and physiology, being able to teach different parts of the bones or different sections of one certain bone, and making songs or something to remember this, may be a way to learn more out of the material instead of lecturing.
Thank you all for joining us today. So now we're going to be transitioning into transparency between professors and students. So first, I just want to touch upon the syllabi. Syllabi are important for most courses, and it is important to be transparent with students, especially with the fact that they could either be live or if you have a set syllabus for the entire semester. I've had some courses that use a digital syllabus and things change in the syllabus, and it became confusing for some students to realize that deadlines and due dates may change, or different activities and different things were scheduled for different points in time. So it's very important for professors and students to have that open line of communication in regards to the syllabus and what the purpose of that syllabus is. Is it necessarily for due dates, or is it to outline more of the grading structure of the course, using percentages in the breakdown of the grade? Moving forward, are there things on the syllabus that may be changed or edited throughout the semester to a similar point with due dates? And then transparent grading criteria. especially in group projects. We talked a little bit about different group projects. I know Abby just talked about how she had a project where she worked in a pair. So it's important that professors take into consideration that not all students work the same, and that when groups or pairs are randomly chosen, it can have either very beneficial or very devastating effects on the group. If you have one student who's a very high performer and then other students who aren't as passionate about the subject, it can be very hard when the group is graded as a whole or when trying to just complete assignments or projects in general. So it's important that that is taken into consideration. Will rubrics be used, and will they be used for the group as a whole or each individual person? As well as how is each person graded in the group? I've had to write a group paper before, and I almost felt as though it was hard for the professor to see what work I did versus my group members, because we didn't write our names in parentheses. You know, we cited our sources, but we didn't put necessarily who wrote each paragraph. So just things like that, and how to go about the lack of participation of a group member. A very important point in transparency. I had a project where we had to rate each other anonymously afterwards. And it was a feeling of worry. Like I felt like I did a good job on the project, but I didn't want my group members to lowball me because they wanted to do well. So just important things to think about that are really impacting our students' grades and how well they are prospering at school. Okay, still moving forward, uploading grades in a timely manner. So it is very different professor to professor. I've had some courses where I do not see my final grade until the final has been taken. And it can be hard to hold yourself accountable when you don't see your progress adding up. Or if some professors are more savvy at using Brightspace than others, so there can be malfunctions with the grading, and they're like, this is just how this goes into the grade book. You know, we can't fix that. So just having more of that open line of communication about how grades are inputted and what that means for you. Another point, what does a midterm grade for a student mean? I just took a course where, you know, my professor emailed us after and was like, we still have so much more of the course to cover. So it's just important to know what that means for you. Feedback and corrections. Are students allowed to make up assignments or do corrections on them? Why or why not is this the case? I think that there has been a lot of discussion about AI, as well as, you know, combating AI, we would need to bring back pen and paper tests. So I think it would be very interesting for us to find some different alternatives or professors to incorporate. Well, we'll go back to the pen and paper tests, but then you can do corrections afterward. That way we know you're still learning the material, but it's not an end all be all. You didn't have to cheat to get this grade, but there's still a way for you to improve it. Similar idea with extra credit, if it's offered, why or why not? As we were talking about earlier, we have so many different resources, and we do have a real sense of community on campus with so many different opportunities. So how can we encourage students to go out and seek these opportunities while also having some sort of positive impact on our grade for getting out there? And although it might not be the events that you're going to might not be super specific to the subject or course that you're taking, you're still learning, just in a different sense. Thank you.
Gabby, to add?
Also, just to add on real quickly about the uploading grades in a timely manner, I think something that was really helpful would be using a point system, because even if you're not as tech savvy and you don't know how to use Brightspace, because I have encountered professors who just don't know how to use it, which is perfectly fine because like you just don't know. But having a point system allows a student to know, like, okay, so I've accumulated this amount of points and this is the total. You can calculate your grade yourself, which is really helpful. Or it's better than seeing Brightspace, because sometimes it can be a little wonky. So you'll think like you have a 50 when you really have a 90 in the class. So just having that point system is really helpful for students.
So the relevance of all of this is that student success is all about lifelong learning and what they take from each class, what each student takes from the classes they take. Being able to have transparency allows students to meet expectations, and utilizing technology will help students in the workforce when they need to use things like, some people don't know how to use Microsoft Word because they only use Google Docs. So to be able to utilize and teach different technologies prepares students for their futures, and being able to make those connections to students can help give a sense of familiarity to topics, even if the student is unfamiliar with the topics, but if they're comfortable to talk to the professor, it can give a sense of comfort.
Mackenzie, you want to add to that?
Sorry, I was muted. This is sort of in relation to the first bullet point on the slide, where student success is not necessarily about passing a test, but I've found that in my personal experience, the test is the testament to your success in retaining material. A lot of the best courses that I've taken have tests that the questions are essentially just either identical or rephrasings of concepts that we have discussed all throughout that unit of a course. And I think that is the best way to sort of like teach people that it's less about the actual tests aren't to like catch you on a technicality where you failed. They're to show that you've been paying attention this entire time and actively participating in the learning process. So I think it's very important that when structuring our classes, we build them around how important they will be for remembering all of that knowledge. I've had good classes and I remember everything from those courses, and I've had bad classes where I forget everything as soon as I no longer have to take it.
Gabby?
Also, when it comes to like tests, I feel like the most useful thing for me has been reviews of the exams, because I don't think it's really helpful to be like, okay, you got this wrong, but like, what is the right answer and how did you get there? And then can you just like explain it? Because I know, I know that when I do something wrong in a test, I always remember the correct answer after the professor goes over, and it's just like, oh, okay, so that's the answer. And I know not a lot of classes have time for that, because just of the, like, if you have a 55-minute class or if you have like an hour and 20-minute class, it can be very daunting because you do have a syllabus and you do have things that you have to focus on. So I think just having like a small portion of class, maybe talking about the question that everyone got the most incorrect, because that's like something that needs to be addressed, because clearly a lot of people aren't understanding this concept or this idea. So just going back and just like checking with them and saying like, okay, so this is what we need to talk about because a lot of you guys got it wrong. So here's the clarification on what it is and what it means, or just anything really, because it's better to just like explain it than to just leave it and do nothing about it.
Great. Thank you for listening. To those of you who are on the line, we're going to open it up for discussion with the students and any questions you have for the students. And also, SCOLT members, if there's any additions you want to add, you can speak up now too and have those additions heard. Any questions from faculty for the students? Sandy.
I'll ask a question. I have a whole list of them here. But thank you. First of all, that was great, and it was really wonderful to hear your point of view. So I really appreciate all of you speaking, from your authentic experiences. So thank you very much. So I have a question for you all. There's sort of a lot of focus, with the exception of a couple active learning slides, that it sounds like a lot of you are still being asked to memorize large amounts of information through PowerPoint or through a textbook and then take a test on it. Some of us don't do that. And so what I would like to know is, how do students feel? How do you feel? I mean, people say, oh, yeah, great. But at the end of the day, how do you really feel about when you're not learning through maybe traditional test taking, but more through discussions that you're held accountable for coming prepared to class for, or group-based tasks that you must complete in class, once again, coming prepared, or writing reflection papers about new content? How do you feel that your learning is impacted by doing assessments that way, instead of through traditional take a test at the end of a semester and a midterm?
Gabby, then Mackenzie.
I love a discussion-based class just because there have been times where I think I know a concept and like what it means, and then someone else brings a different perspective to it, and they're just like, listening to their opinion really helps me further understand it or just look at it from a different lens, because we don't all see information the same. So just having someone else say, actually, I thought about it in this way, it makes you think more about it. Group-based discussions, it really depends on the group and what we're talking about, because I don't know, sometimes some people don't come prepared. So it's like, okay, how do you have a conversation with someone who hasn't done the reading or doesn't know about the material? So you're kind of just sitting there like, okay. And then like giving them like a summary of what happened, so you're not really learning that way. But I do love like a class-based discussion.
Thank you.
Mackenzie, and then Delaney.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Gabby just said there. I would say this is maybe one of the limitations of SCOLT as a group, in that we can never really know what the people who are going to struggle in most of these environments are going to say, because they're not the people in our organization. I would think that most of us are generally on the higher end in terms of grades, and that is why we were suggested to take on these roles. But I think from my own perspective, I also completely agree that participation-based, sort of discussion-based learning is the way to go. My best classes have involved a sort of a hybrid model of lecture and discussion, where the professor is very clearly going through slides, but it's a lot less structured. It's very open to, like, you can ask a question on virtually any slide, and it leads more to like group conversation than anything else. But I also know that in a purely discussion model, I personally would get very, very anxious in that environment. And that's not to say that I'm in the majority or anything, but I don't think that we can make a one-size-fits-all solution. And it pains me to say that, because it would really help.
Delaney.
I totally understand what Mackenzie's saying. I think that my first semester, I had some classes that were more active learning based, and then others where it was primarily just lecturing. And in the active learning environments, it was, you're going to talk. If you don't talk, it takes off of your participation. And so I think that automatically my brain was like, I love these. We're just going to take a test and that's it. And you don't have to talk if you don't want to. However, I think that as time went on, I became more confident. I think that my professors, they created a safe environment where I felt that my opinion mattered, that it was okay to participate, although I know sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking, like I totally understand that. I think the confidence builds up, but it also takes, the professor and the peers to understand how a good conversation should flow and how the discussion should be relevant within the classroom and into real world problems. Um, so I do think that, you know, especially during like this day and age, some people have more anxiety and, some people tend to just be more shy and not want to, collaborate with other people. But I think that that comes with the motivation too, and also, like the importance of it. Just explaining, reiterating to your students how important a discussion is and, you know, allowing errors to be made. There were so many classes where I said things that might have been totally off topic or, a theory that I just came up with. And that was one thing that one of my Spanish professors, she left like our discussion very open-ended. And we all had different theories about certain texts and certain readings. But then when you hear someone else's theory, you're like, wait, I could think about it this way, or it adds on to your own. And then my professor was just, sitting there while we all were having this conversation, and she was like, I love this because it's making me think differently about it. And I know not all readings and texts are open-ended like that, but I do think that the confidence comes within the classroom, knowing that it's a safe place to share your opinion. And I think that at the end of the day, I would rather be graded based on my willingness to participate and, my own ideas rather than pen and paper overall test.
Teresa and then Gabby.
First, again, thank you all. This is very helpful, particularly in my role as an instructional designer. And for those of you that aren't aware of what an instructional designer is, we are primarily faculty support, and we provide support for faculty teaching in multiple modalities such as asynchronous online, synchronous online, hybrid, and HiFlex. So a lot of what you're saying are things that some of our faculty, if they're not interacting with you in the classroom, they may not see, or they see it in a different way. But I picked up on two specific things. One was, Andrew, when you talked about layout and bright space. This has been a big conversation in a lot of different things. We do try to provide information for faculty on best practice for structure, particularly for fully online courses, but any feedback that you all could provide, and again, you could certainly provide it back through Dr. Harris, on what you think about layout in a course, what you think is really important, what you would like to see is really helpful, because then those are things we can provide to the faculty, particularly as they're thinking about how to lay out their course regardless of modality. So I appreciate that. The other thing is, and my staff would tell you this, you talked about relevance. Relevance is probably one of my favorite words, because as you as students try to figure out what you're being taught, how it relates to your lives, and to your areas of expertise, is that how you define relevance in some ways, particularly when it comes to your academics, and then how it's applicable to your field or to your life?
I think that's one of the most important things in college to prepare me for my future. So I need to be able to take what I learn in my college classes and apply them to what I want to be doing in the real world. That's what relevance is to me. So being able to do that, being able to see those connections between the classroom and the real world, I think is really important and keeps students engaged.
Just
Yes, I find that there's a lot of different aspects to relevancy. First of all, is it relevant to me during like this time in my life? Am I interested in it? Can I relate to this on a personal level? But then I think that, and this is something that my advisor and my professor, Dr. O'Toole, just really pushes on us, is the relevancy in the real world as well. Taking the learning that we're learning within the classrooms and then being able to use it in a different context, like that is really meaningful in itself. Like we want it to be meaningful. So I think it goes with like two ways. When I'm learning something in a class, if it is relevant to me, I care about it. I think about it a lot. I have, background information or I want information on it. But then it's like, you know, because people always say like, well, why am I learning this? Or what does this have to do with me? But then when you use it in the real world, or you're having a discussion with another person and then the topic gets brought up again, that's when I feel like you really realize how relevant the information is and how important it is to pay attention in the context that you're learning about. So I think it has much more to do with just much more than just the individual itself, but with the real world and how my knowledge about a certain topic can influence and impact the world around me.
Mackenzie, do you want to add to that? And then Gabby?
Yeah, it was basically just sort of like, I thought a very strong point of the slides regarding sort of relevance, but also the sort of concept of getting class out of just the classroom environment really helps me to think about the conversation around what is relevant to me as a student, because what is relevant requires just as much convincing towards me as the student as it does towards the professor, where I'm telling them what I think would be relevant for my own life. It's just as important for that professor to show me that something that I might not think of as relevant is in fact relevant. I know, for example, in my own academic field, in the anthropology department, we run the anthropology in practice talks, and a huge portion of that is just sort of like, what are people who have these degrees in that field doing? And it sort of gets me to think like, oh, these things that I don't really care about in class, they do have place in my life outside of school. So I think just that sort of like putting it in perspective for the students is really important to building on our sense of what is relevant as well.
Gabby?
Yeah, I do agree with taking what we're learning in the classroom sometimes outside of the classroom, because it gives you a chance to see like that this is an actual thing. Like I think in your class, actually, Dr. Harris, where we had to find something to do with something health related. And I just remember having to look around my dorm and just like look around campus itself to see how like, okay, we're working to like reduce smoking, and then just being able to see it and like, okay, look, that's a way that they're trying to decrease smoking on campus. I think that's really helpful. And then again, bringing back the kinesiology class, there are some things that you can like actually do and then watch, and then you can learn that way just from having that personal experience. And I feel like when you have that personal experience, it makes it easier to retain the information because you know it and you can redo it so that you can kind of like jog your memory and say like, oh, this is what that means. It's this part of the body. And then just going from there. So I do think like if it's applicable to your class, because like not every classroom can take it outside of the classroom, but if you can, I would strongly recommend it because it does help you see the relevancy in what you're doing, because you get to actually see it and experience it rather than just hearing about it. Because when we're in school, we learn about so many different things, so many different ways that we can do something, but when we actually apply it to the real world or see it in the real world, it gives us meaning and it makes us see like, okay, so what we're learning is important, and we can have like an example of what we can use for the next stages in our life. So like when we actually go to work, maybe it's something that we can use or we can push further and just add on to it. So that's a good part.
And that's about our time. So I just want to say thank you very much to our students and our advisory board for both their presentations during these winter breakout sessions. It was very valuable. And also thank you to all the faculty, staff, and everyone who was able to join us today.
Thank you all. We really appreciate you taking time out from your vacation, and have a good rest of your vacation and come back rested and ready to get back to work. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jackie.
you.
All right.